Spring is here, and with that I like to get the motorbike out and just ride to wherever the fancy takes me. But in the fantastical world of JRPGs, I still get my fix of adventure, worlds so large they take hours to fully uncover, with that unmistakable pioneering atmosphere that supports the journey from minute 1 to the credits roll. And we'll start with the one game that inspired this video, which is Xenoblade Chronicles X, in this case the definitive edition, which I am still playing. Without question, the best of the Xeno games when it comes to exploration. That's not just Xenoblade, that is all of them, Xenosaga and Xenogears included. Xenoblade Chronicles X, while it has little if any connection to the other games in the series, though that could change as I near the end, is just a marvel in terms of what it brings to the table for adventure. How Monolith Soft managed to realise the world of Mira and make it look even better for the Switch release is just wizardry. It's all based around the remaining dregs of humanity who have fled into the cosmos after the destruction of Earth, and one of the arcs that escaped crash lands on the dangerous yet beautiful planet of Mira, a planet full of unidentifiable flora and fauna that the humans must now work to coexist with. The self-insert protag works with the various citizens of New LA to achieve just that, running around Mira to expand data capture and find the precious life hold which holds the key to humanity's continued survival. Xenoblade Chronicles X does little for me on the story front, still good as a standalone but nowhere near the layered and emotional depth of other games in the Xeno series, but when it comes to scale and world traversal, nothing else tops it. Running on foot alone, I feel insignificant on Mira. Enemies that are far above my level force me to weave away from danger, and there are so many secrets to find in the world in terms of vistas and hidden side quests. But what makes the game so good is that the method of exploration continually improves. You start on foot, eventually you get your Skell unit, and then finally earn the license to fly. And even with that added dimension of exploration available, I still felt small and inconsequential. The atmosphere that Xenoblade Chronicles X has is unrivaled among its Xeno franchise peers. If you value adventure and the thrill of the unknown, you play this game. But just before we carry on, I want to make you guys aware that YouTube memberships are now available if you want to support the channel. For £4 a month, a member can get some awesome benefits like these custom-made membership badges. Alternatively, you can support me on Patreon as well, where you can vote on future videos, get handwritten Christmas cards like this one, or partake in the quarterly giveaways. We've given away some really cool stuff this year, like the limited edition of Metaphor ReFantasio. Thank you for listening, and now back to the video. And if we're talking intergalactic space epics, then I'll also put up the Star Ocean franchise with Second Story R. Similar in premise in a way to Xenoblade Chronicles X, though certainly more focused in terms of story, though I'm going to admit I wasn't overly enthralled with it by the end anyway. But what Second Story R did have was once again that sense of adventure. You're immediately swept away from the high technical landscape of Claude's spaceship to the more primitive yet beautiful world of Expel that is more akin to the Middle Ages. Claude's ultimate goal is to find a way back home, but in that time he meets a host of other characters like the other protagonist Reina, and also assists with the danger facing the planet itself. And Excel as a setting is gorgeous, brought to life by its recent remake. The pixel art style has been sharpened and polished to a beautiful sheen, and it works extremely well. The planet of Expel in the early stages feels grand, expansive, and the towns all express their own unique personality. And I get the impression that freedom was the ultimate aim of Star Ocean 2. No single playthrough would ever be the same, whether it be from a gameplay perspective with the multitude of ways to break it, or the story side with the host of optional recruitable characters. While Claude and Reina are required, there are a host of other members who you will meet in the journey too, but not all of them can be taken on a single journey, and some will outright be locked off depending on what choices you make and what protagonist you used. Not only does it provide added incentive to play through the game multiple times, but it just gives even more to that sense of being a visitor to an unknown planet. While I did feel Star Ocean Second Story R had some issues, especially on the story side in the later parts, there's no doubt it excelled bringing its world to life. Now, since we're talking about worlds that feel alive, let's jump to Tales of Vesperia. Not my favourite in the series, I've made that clear before, and that's mainly down to its story and shoddy writing. There's no doubt in my mind that Vesperia is my least favourite in the series to date in terms of storytelling, especially as it gets closer to the end. But what Vesperia does have is a grand and wide world. Vesperia's overmap is huge and gives you a real sense of wanderlust, maybe even to its own detriment at times. There were instances where I wanted to explore the world, but it felt a bit empty, or that feeling of adventure wasn't fully embraced because the story would gate me off from visiting certain locales until later on. Yet I've no doubt that this world would feel more alive depending on how much side content a player does. There is a lot in Vesperia, so much in fact that you'd likely need a guide to see all of it. But even without one, you'll naturally bump into a few side quests just as a byproduct of exploring in general. There is that much of it that it would be a difficult task to just miss it all. Undoubtedly the game isn't for me, and I'm not going to change my mind on that, but it does do a good job in selling that sense of adventure through its world. And another game that does that is the recently released Visions of Mana. Once again, flawed, yes, no doubt that the game had problems once again with the story and characters, especially near the end once again, but Visions of Mana had a variety of aspects on its side, including its beautiful world that it's set in. As Val sets off with Hina on a pilgrimage towards the Tree of Mana, it doesn't take long to get sucked into the world on display here. I will say, as I stepped out of the village for the first time and got my initial taste of what the game was all about, I was very excited. Those first 5 hours had Visions of Mana in my top 5 games of 2024, and with some ease as well. Semi-open world zones and freedom to pretty much go wherever you want, at least within the confines of the maps, and it never lets up in terms of beauty. The art team for Visions of Mana passed their test with flying colours. I have not one bad thing to say about their work. You had a world of infinite possibility, unique locales, and that calming atmosphere of a standard JRPG adventure. Visions of Mana embraces it, and excels while doing that as well. Every land is completely separate from the last, and they all look amazing. I can't count the amount of times I just stopped to take in the vistas around me. That's a sign that you've done a good job, if a player is willing to stop and take it all in. And that first visit to the Mana Tree, they nailed it. They absolutely nailed the feeling of approaching a holy sanctuary. It is one of those moments that sticks long in the memory. And I've mentioned before, but I lament the wasted potential of Visions of Mana. I personally believe that this game would have been even grander if Oka Studios weren't being forced to wrap up the project before they were ready. Even so, for adventure lovers, Visions of Mana is an easy recommendation for me. Speaking of adventure, that word itself is synonymous with the excellent Ys series. With the exception of games like Ys Origin and 9, which are limited in that aspect by their settings, the franchise overall is all about braving the unknown. The ever-recognisable Adol Kristin is a young man who loves adventure, who gets giddy from the sheer thought of it, and it's a joy to just join him on his journeys around the world, which are retold through his personal memoirs. I had a treasure trove of games to choose from here, 8, 7, Ark of Napishtim, the first 2, but I'm going to give that love to my personal game of 2024, which was X Nordics. The evolution of the series that I had been craving for years, I am all on board for ship-based mechanics, and X Nordics is all about that. Set in the expansive Abelia Gulf, Adol is joined by Kaja as they work together to discover the cause of demon-like appearances around the islands. The big draw of Nordics was that the world was massive. It was essentially the East version of Zelda Wind Waker. This ship pretty much becomes your self-controlled transport from island to island. You're going to be sailing the waves, taking out rogue fleets, scanning out wildlife, finding secrets, and it quickly became my favourite part of the game, especially when considering the improvements that could be made to the ship itself. And even when on land, the traversal is still fun with the use of mana lassos and hoverboards to make the journey ever more fun. The combat was one of my favourite iterations in the series to date, and for me, Falcon put a good balance between the exploration tied to the ship and exploration tied to moving around on foot. There was a real effort to make both mediums important throughout the game. I know that some had issue with the ship, but the exact same thing was said about Wind Waker when it first released, and that is still my favourite Zelda title till this day. The exploration of East 10 to me was a new frontier for Ys as a franchise. It's a mode of gameplay that I hope to see replicated in some way in future games. As much as I was a bit confused with the announcement of Proud Nordics, I'll likely be playing that as well. The game left a very good impression. Now, how do you top riding the waves of the ocean with your own ship? Well, you take the ship out of the ocean and put it in the sky instead. And there is a JRPG that does just that, one that hasn't been touched since the GameCube era, and that is Skies of Arcadia. Even the opening title screen, with just visual and music alone, told me everything I needed to know about what angle this game would be taking. That small section alone spoke 1,000 words. It was no surprise really, as this was the core aim of the game from inception. Developer Overworks felt that many games at the time, like Final Fantasy VII and Koudelka, were defined more by their dark undertones, accompanied by a cast that fit that mythos. In contrast, the team wanted to create a bright and cheery world which incentivized exploration, and also looked to their main characters to reflect that. They certainly managed to do that as well. Combining a ship-faring adventure with the idea of being a group of sky pirates is just a really neat angle to go down. I mean, who doesn't like being a pirate? You've got the charming cast of characters that feeds into that, like Vice, Ica and Fina, and a host of diverse locales in the skies and a massive amount of hidden landmasses that contributed to side content. This was what Overworks were attempting to bring to the fore since the game's inception. They wanted to create a game with seemingly boundless potential and possibility, a world of wonder and mystery that you feel compelled to explore. Skies of Arcadia achieves this not only through the standard skyfaring traversal, but also through the abundance of secrets in the world. There are hidden areas to find and discoveries to be made for those willing to comb every little area of the map, or the sky in this case. Such a large portion of my time was dedicated to just roaming the world. I had little desire to continue the story right off the bat. I wanted to see what this world had to offer, and it rarely disappointed. Very few games are able to replicate the sense of freedom that Skies of Arcadia presents. It is hampered somewhat by its lack of direction at times and its high encounter rate, even on the curtailed GameCube version, but Skies of Arcadia is well regarded even now for how unique it is among its peers. Not many can replicate the sense of adventure as well as this game does. Sadly, our final 4 games are all confined to the ground for the most part, though they do eventually bring in other mediums of exploration later on too, and with that in mind the next entry will be Dragon Quest III, in this case the HD 2D re-release. Any of the Dragon Quest games fit this mould really, they all follow that similar style right up to the latest entry. The world is threatened by some evil force, the hero rises and goes on a quest to stop them. Simple and comforting as a JRPG experience. Dragon Quest III is no different in that regard. You're given your mission by the king and immediately set off on your adventure, visiting a host of villages to solve their problems, scaling large towers with monsters lurking on the floors. It's an adventure game in pretty much every facet. You're effectively free to go wherever you want, and it's often worth it as well. Optional dungeons often give you some of the best gear in the game, and it certainly gives that sense of reward when you manage to find one. Not much more to say about Dragon Quest III. As far as adventure goes, this series has been doing it since 1986. Now, there is also another game from Square that takes a somewhat similar approach to Dragon Quest III, but it's also spread over centuries of in-game time. Romancing Saga 2 Revenge of the Seven certainly has the adventure angle down right from the beginning. The idea of this game is that the starting protagonist is taught an ability to inherit the skills and qualities of his predecessors, which can then be passed down when his time comes to an end. As you make your way through the game, time skips occur, and the new emperor will inherit all of the skills that the previous one had. So ever so slowly you are becoming more powerful and experienced as the generations pass. The ultimate goal was to travel across the world and stop the 7 heroes who have since gone rogue. Now, while it's not the most inspired premise, I found myself quite enamoured with the story. What's interesting about Revenge of the Seven is that the main events of the story have already happened, and I was travelling around the world in order to piece it all together. The goal was to stop the 7 heroes, but it was interesting to witness their backstories and how they eventually ended up the way they did. It's not winning any awards for narrative quality, but I like the angle it went down. Yet the real reason Revenge of the Seven won my vote is because of how much freedom it gives. There's a massive world to explore, but I could go wherever I wanted, often to my own detriment if I didn't do a side quest in time. The beauty of this game is that you've got a lot of optional characters to recruit, each with their own quirks they bring to the table. The more you recruit, the more top level skills the Emperor can eventually learn for himself, which eventually all feeds into the main quest itself of stopping the Seven. I loved it all said and done. It was a game that balanced the obtuse nature of the series with an up-to-date approach that catered to a modern player. It presented this vast and diverse world, and it was all down to my discretion as to how I wanted to explore it. Which can also be said for the excellent Octopath Traveler 2, which I've made no secret is a near-on perfect JRPG for me. My favourite game that I played in 2023 without question, and one of the finest JRPG experiences I've had in recent years, Octopath Traveler 2 is such a step up from the first. While the original did have promise, there were certainly issues tied to the stories of the 8 protagonists. Octopath Traveler 2 worked to remedy those issues while also improving on the strengths of the original 2. Once I completed that prologue, the game just let me out into the wild to make my own journey. It's a sign of a great game when it is happy to give more control to the player to progress in the way they want, and Octopath 2 had that idea at the forefront. It is a vast world all said and done, 2 main continents, a bunch of optional secrets to discover, enjoyable individual stories for the most part tied to the 8 characters. It was one of those games that I personally could not put down. The combat with its burst mechanic was snappy and satisfying right from the off, the world building was brilliant, and it just felt so liberating to play. So often in a JRPG you're going to be put on rails, and though linear progression isn't an issue, there is a place for those types of games. If you give me a world as rich and diverse as this one, I want to explore it. I want to see what it has to offer. Let me off the hook in order to do that. Octopath Traveler 2 is such a fine game. I am always happy to sing its praises because quite simply it does so many things right. An adventure-style JRPG that has charm, density, and an intriguing world to get stuck into. And as we come to the final game on the list, it is yet another Square Enix title, and it's the one they've been putting a lot of resources into in the past half-decade or so. In this instance, I couldn't turn down putting Final Fantasy VII Rebirth on a list centered around adventure. Following on after the escape from Midgar in Part 1, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth immediately works to open the world up within the first 5 hours. You witness the backstory of Cloud, Sephiroth and Tifa, you ask around town for some advice of where to go, and eventually you are thrust into the world of Gaia itself in all its splendour. And there is splendour to behold. There is no doubt that Square used a lot of money to make the game look amazing. It is one of the best looking JRPGs of this era without question. The planet has been brought to life expertly, and there's so many differing locales that the group visits over the course of the adventure, each split into sizable zones of their own that are littered with points of interest, and of course places to advance the main story. Now, the approach that Final Fantasy VII Rebirth takes to exploration, I have mentioned that I'm indifferent to it. The Ubisoft model of putting a bunch of icons on the map may take away from the mystery of what I may eventually find, but I did have a good time just finding my way to them. There are often intricate paths to take. I might need to use the chocobo in certain areas in order to glide down to out-of-reach platforms. It never caused me an issue, and definitely didn't detract from immersion. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth did have problems mostly tied to forced padding in between main story segments, but I had a great time with it all said and done, and I fully expect the same will happen with Part 3. A big part of that was how well realised its world was, and how much freedom it gave me to explore every corner of it. Thank you for watching this video. If you liked it, please like and subscribe for more JRPG content, and consider joining my Patreon if you're interested. Peace.